Okay, let's begin with the late Middle Ages. This is the very first period we're studying in our topic of crime and punishment. We begin in 1450, so what was the attitude to crime and punishment like in this period? Okay, we have to remember that during the Middle Ages, England or Britain was a very hierarchical society with clear levels of different groups of people within society. At the very top of society, of course, was the king, appointed by God. They believed in the divine right of kings. He had enormous wealth and privilege and power. Underneath him, you had the aristocracy, the nobility, the church bishops, and at the very bottom of the pile, you had the peasants or the villeins. These are people, the majority of the population, very little money, very little power, hardly any status at all. So a very hierarchical society. There were three types of court that dealt with crime in the late Middle Ages. You had the church courts. These were the most prestigious, the most important courts, and these traditionally dealt with crimes of murder or treason or forgery, really serious crimes. You also had a series of church courts. These were the second types of courts that existed in the Middle Ages, and church courts, as the name suggests, dealt primarily with people who were involved with the church. Of course, the church is incredibly important during this period, and if you were a bishop, if you were a clergyman, a priest, and you committed a crime, the church courts would deal with that crime, and they were more lenient than other forms of court during this period. And lastly, the third type of court that you could be placed in front of was a manor court, and this was the lowest of the courts, and this dealt with crimes of the peasantry, where the local landowner, the lord of the manor, had his authority. So three types of court during this period. Of course, no police force at all in Britain during this period, so again the king and all the other systems of justice relied on harsh punishment to try and deter people from committing crime. This meant that execution was very common during this period. Execution, mutilation were commonly used to try and deter people committing crimes. As there was no police force, they expected the local community, the local village, to police itself in a way. How did they try and enforce this? They made all men or young boys over the age of 12 join a tithing. This was a group of 10 people who were, in a sense, policing each other. If one of them committed a crime, the other 9 would have to get that person and bring them to justice, or they would have to pay the fine or suffer the consequences of the crime of that one person. So this tended to glue the society together, to glue the community together, and stop people committing crime because they knew the consequences if that happened. However, if someone did commit a crime, there would be a shout out, something called the hue and cry, designed to let everybody in the vicinity know, the local community, the village or the town, know that a crime had been committed. There was no police force, so the only way for a criminal to be caught was if they were caught red-handed, or if the posse, the sheriff or the constable could apprehend them. Okay, what happened to them if they were caught? Their peers, their local friends and neighbours would be expected to bring their knowledge of the person to bear on that person's guilt or innocence. And if an accused person could find enough people who would swear an oath that they were a good, honest person with no criminal character whatsoever, that could get them cleared of the charge. If it did go to the community court, then the people in the village would form the jury, and they would be expected to bring their knowledge of that person to bear in the trial. Unlike today, where of course we have to be totally unbiased and not know anyone who's accused of a crime in court, it was the total opposite back in the Middle Ages, where they thought your experience of the person will be a huge benefit in determining guilt or innocence. Okay, to summarise, a very hierarchical society with the king appointed by God at the very top, at the bottom, the majority of the population, very poor peasantry. Three types of court: a royal court, a church court, and the manor courts. Execution was common. Prison hardly ever used. Tithings knitted the community together. The hue and cry if someone committed a crime. The sheriff was brought in to try and find someone if the hue and cry didn't work. guilt determined by the local community, where experience of the perpetrator was thought to be a good thing. That's the late Middle Ages, which is the very first period that we studied during our topic of crime and punishment.